So my talk is AI for materials. And in fact, I want to start with what we talked about last year already. At our last year Innovation China conference, we shared our view on SynBio, synthetic biology. And we talked about the design, build, test, and learn cycle in synthetic biology. And so SynBio, we also has many startups in the West, and it goes into application as well as platform companies. If you follow the field, most platform companies struggle. And the earliest one, like Amiris, actually went bankrupt last year. But among the product company, we actually just invested this year in a company called Novo Nutrients, and taking CO2 and hydrogen to make synthetic animal feed protein and human protein. And you will hear from the CEO a bit later today. So we also studied the SynBio, want to share our view as to how we invest and on the technology readiness level. So we published a paper about the 4 levels of synthetic biology. So on the lowest, or the technology challenge part, the least challenging is a whole cell. So you actually synthesize with a whole cell, and then the next level up is in-cell synthesis, but out-cell production. So basically, the cell synthesizes some material, but then it pushes it out of the cell. So you don't have to break the cell wall for capturing that material. So that's the next level of difficulty in terms of technical challenge. And then the next level up is in-cell synthesis and in-cell product. So those are companies that make PHA and so on. Like later on, you will hear from Brufa. PHA is made in cell, and you have to break the cell in order to get to the material. So it's challenging and costly. And then finally, most challenging would be cell-free. So you don't even have a cell, and you synthesize, simulate a cell, and you synthesize outside. So along these levels, the cost goes up and the technical difficulty goes up. So in our view, actually for investing, like for venture capital, we are sticking with the conservative into the whole cell. So basically the cell itself becomes the product. And so that's what Novo Nutrients is about. And one of the reasons we have selected Novo Nutrients for our investment. So I started with that SynBio, and this is a picture of all the Chinese startups in the SynBio field, and into platforms and products. And so we continue to study that field. But that's a background in terms of for materials. I believe material discovery has very similar design, build, test, and learn cycle. So it's not called that, but basically you first design the material, you build, you test it, and then you learn. And that's basically how material discovery in machine learning or AI is. So Dr. Yi mentioned before, the material project in the US actually started in 2011. And as you can see, the mini database entry, similar like in China, the database entry keeps going up every year. But the discovery of new materials remain challenging. Actually, before Google AI discovered new materials, like literally news last year, you have not few people heard of the material genome project or the material project, because there were very few news from that project. And the Google AI said that it brought an order of magnitude expansion in stable material known to humanity. That was a very big claim. And in fact, it's funny that Professor Tony Cheatham, who hired me into venture, who was at UC Santa Barbara professor at that time, published a paper basically challenging the Google AI claim. And his thought is, he has this triangle here: utility, credibility, and novelty. So Google AI produced a new structure doesn't mean it's a new material. So Professor Chetham's view is, okay, the material has to be useful. And out of all these 22,000 new structures, few are useful. And so as you can see, even the biggest excitement in material and AI get refuted, and we may or may not, there are very few materials that discover from it. So why is it? So why is it so challenging? We start from 2011 to now, and it's still not many new materials that are known to be discovered by AI. First of all, it's from a micro to macro layer adds layers of modeling complexity. Because unlike synthetic biology, where you have all the genes lined up in basically a string of these a string of these letters, the material you have to go from a primary level, which is microscopic, and then to a secondary level, to tertiary level, and to a quarterly assembly. So it is very difficult to actually say I discovered a new material, just like say new composition, and it may or may not be actually useful as a physical object. That's what Professor Chetham is saying. So the material may not be useful, and it cannot be called material. So from the very atom line up to the secondary, to the tertiary, and to the quarterly level, so that adds modeling complexity. It's much more complex than SynBio, for example, and of course, much more complex than big language model. And then, secondly, is high throughput or rapid experimentation is also challenging. So this is from Stanford lab on AI for materials, and you can see the robots trying to synthesize material. And I think later on we will hear from Patrick from Synterra in Singapore that they have also high throughput screening, trying to synthesize these materials so for rapid testing. But there is not one uniform platform where you can synthesize all materials in high throughput. So the first US startup in AI material was founded in 2013, Sichuan, which you will hear a little later at 11:40. And that's why I'm also trying to hurry up to catch up on time. So Sichuan founded in 2013, and you will hear from the CEO how the model started from trying to discover material to trying to sell service, trying to, now it's a SaaS company, and it's actually doing well. Many multinational companies use its platform, but with its own data to discover new materials. So we have been studying this. So if you look at the data, so everybody starts with public literature data, or like the data from the bank, the Material Genome Project, or in the US equivalent, and literature, and so on. And then you have model simulated data. So you can write software and simulate out a bunch of data. And then you have the experiment data. Then you do experiments, and then you have the experiment data. So in fact, if you look at it, the value goes up because actually every AI company we talk to, the most useful data is actually experiment data. You cannot get much or useful out of just the public data or the public data or literature data available. You got to have experiment. But then the point is the cost of acquisition for these data also goes up. The experiment data, you actually have to experiment, right? So it's a dichotomy. The most valuable data is the most costly to acquire. So high quality data remains the #1 challenge. The most valuable is also the most costly. If you want to have a good AI for material, you actually have to have all these 3 layers of data. So you have both public, then model simulated data, and then experimental data. And you need to literally have all 3 in order to be useful. So the next challenge is, in fact, the second biggest challenge is finding good application in a very long value chain. So if you are AI researcher in materials, actually what are you going to work on? So which material are you going to pick? It's a little bit like synthetic biology, where a lot of companies, they struggle with what's the product pipeline, right? How do you pick the product to work on? And many researchers want to identify the biggest applications. So we are putting our CM material circle here. This is how we look at the material industry. But it's just an illustration as to material is so upstream. It has so many different products and applications downstream that it's very challenging to pick the good application to work on. So as a startup, that's a second biggest challenge. So we did a similar map as to the platform company and then the products company. And right now, from our team's studies, there are more platform company to than products company. I think primarily because platform you start, and then you actually have to know what you want to make to become a product company. So that's why there are more platform companies than product company. But we actually invested in one called Yunjing Tedao, and later on he's going to be on a panel, and it's a product of super alloys. So that is used for satellite copper communication, the data line communication. You will hear about it later. It is an example of using AI plus materials, but found a great application in super alloy and a very specific product that can be sold with that alloy. So that's the status of the industry, and we're continuing to look at the platform companies and so on. So we may invest in another platform company later. So I want to conclude with this slide. AI plus materials is expected to grow very rapidly, 30+ annual growth rate in the next decade, according to a forecast. So despite all the challenges that I'm saying, we actually are kind of positive, feeling that it is the moment that has come to look into the field and to invest in the field, because the potential is there, and we just need to get the right business model and the right company, right application, and so on. So we do see the acceleration of the industry, and we are going to be investing into that. So I finished 8 minutes early.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Min Zhou.